Imagine for a moment that you are standing in front of the Great Wall of China. Impressive, right? More than 20,000 kilometers of stone and history winding through the mountains. Now get ready to have your mind completely blown, because today you're going to discover that in Africa, there once existed a system of walls that made the Great Wall of China look like child's play. I'm talking about more than 16,000 kilometers of fortifications. No, you didn't mishear. 16,000 kilometers. And they were not simple little walls at all. They were monumental structures that protected what may have been the most powerful and sophisticated empire Africa had ever known. The name of that empire was Benin, and its history will shake everything you thought you knew about the greatness of ancient civilizations. If you're ready to discover how an African kingdom built the largest earthwork ever made by human hands, then stay with me until the end of this video, and while you're at it, give it a like, because this story deserves to be known by everyone. It was the year 1440. Medieval Europe was still struggling against the Black Death, and London was described by Europeans themselves as a place of theft and murder. On the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, in West Africa, something extraordinary was being born. Oba Ewuare the Great ascended the throne of the Kingdom of Benin. But this man was not just a king. He was a visionary, an architect, a brilliant military strategist, and he had an audacious dream. To transform his kingdom into the most impenetrable fortress in the known world, Ewuare looked at his capital, the city of Benin, and he didn't just see a city, he saw the heart of an empire. But to protect that heart, he would need something never seen before. And that was when the most ambitious engineering project in African history began. The first Europeans who arrived in Benin were absolutely stunned. The Dutchman Dapper wrote in 1668 that the city was surrounded by a special wall with a very wide and deep moat, but he had no idea of the true scale of what they were seeing. Imagine this. You're on a plane flying over present-day Nigeria. Down below, even after centuries, it is still possible to see scars on the ground, lines stretching for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. These are the remains of the Benin Walls, a network of fortifications so vast that it covered an area larger than that of many entire European countries. To understand the scale of this construction, let's compare. The Great Wall of China, with all its branches, is about 21,000 kilometers long. Impressive, yes, but it was built over more than 2,000 years by different dynasties. The Benin Walls, at 16,000 kilometers, were built in only 200 years. And here's the detail that will leave you speechless. They were 4 times taller than the walls of the city of Benin itself. But how exactly were these walls built? The process was a masterpiece of engineering. First, builders dug a deep ditch. The excavated earth wasn't wasted. It was carefully piled on the inner side, forming a wall that could reach up to 17 meters in height. Yes, you heard that right, 17 meters. To give you an idea, that's equivalent to a 5-story building. At the top of these walls, wooden palisades were built, increasing the height even more and creating perfect defensive positions for archers. The moat in front could be up to 6 meters deep and 15 meters wide. Imagine trying to cross that in the middle of a battle, with a rain of arrows coming from above. But here's what makes it even more impressive. These were not continuous walls like those in China. They formed an intelligent and complex system of more than 500 interconnected walls, creating a defensive labyrinth that protected not only the capital, but hundreds of cities and towns throughout the empire's territory. Each section had its own purpose. Some protected vital trade routes, others marked sacred territories. There were walls that served as customs barriers, controlling the flow of goods and people, and the most imposing ones surrounded major urban centers, turning each city into an almost invincible fortress. Think about it for a moment. While Europe was living what we call the Dark Ages, with small and poorly defended towns, Benin had created a territorial defense system that had no parallel anywhere in the world. It was as if an entire country were a gigantic fortress. But who were the men behind this monumental work? They were not forced slaves. As many imagined, they were skilled artisans, native engineers who mastered sophisticated construction techniques. They knew exactly how to work with the region's lateritic soil, how to drain rainwater, how to create structures that would last for centuries. And here's a fascinating detail. The walls were not only functional, they were also a symbol of the empire's power and organization. Each wall told a story, Some had specific decorative patterns. Others incorporated architectural elements that reflected the wealth and sophistication of Benin culture. The wall system was so efficient that the Benin Empire remained practically undefeated for more than 600 years, from 800 to 1897, when it finally fell into the hands of British colonizers. While other African kingdoms fell to external pressure or internal conflicts, Benin thrived, protected by its impenetrable network of fortifications, which had become legendary throughout the region, but the walls were just one part of Benin's power. Behind them flourished one of the most advanced civilizations in the world. The capital, the city of Benin, was a planned urban center with wide, straight streets, an efficient drainage system, and impressive architecture. The Oba's palace was so large and elaborate that Europeans compared it with the finest palaces of Europe. Benin metallurgy was centuries ahead of its time. The famous Benin bronzes, with their artistic precision and refined technique, left Europeans speechless. How was it possible that savage Africans produced such sophisticated works of art? This question tormented colonizers because it completely challenged their notions of racial superiority. Benin's army was equally impressive. Organized into specialized units, Benin warriors mastered advanced combat tactics. They had heavy infantry, elite archers, efficient cavalry, and even special units of female warriors. Their weapons were forged by the best metalworkers of the era, and their military discipline was legendary. Trade was another pillar of Benin's power. The empire controlled strategic trade routes connecting the African interior with the Atlantic Ocean. Ivory, spices, fine textiles, precious metals, everything passed through Benin, generating wealth that financed both public works and the growth of the army. But why, then, were these monumental walls forgotten by history? The answer lies in 1897, one of the most tragic years in African history. The British, using a diplomatic incident as a pretext, launched the so-called punitive expedition against Benin. What followed was one of the most brutal looting events in colonial history. In a matter of days, centuries of civilization were destroyed. The royal palace was burned down. Thousands of works of art were stolen. Many of them still adorn European museums today. The city was devastated, and the political system that had functioned for centuries was dismantled. But even with all that destruction, the walls remained as a silent testimony to the lost greatness. For decades, they were ignored by Western historians. When archaeologists finally began to study them seriously in the 1960s and 1970s, the discovery was revolutionary. Patrick Darling, one of the leading researchers on the walls, wrote, "These structures represent the largest earthwork ever constructed by man, surpassing in scale anything comparable in Africa or anywhere else in the world." He calculated that the total volume of earth moved to build the walls was greater than that of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Today, unfortunately, the walls of Benin face a new threat: rampant urban development. Many sections have already been destroyed to make way for roads, houses, and buildings. It is a tragedy because we are losing one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements. But there is hope. International organizations and the Nigerian government have finally recognized the historical importance of the walls. Preservation projects are underway, and there is growing awareness of the need to protect this unique heritage of humanity. So why is this story not widely known? Why, when we talk about great historical walls, do we think only of China and not of Benin? The answer is uncomfortable but necessary. For centuries, the historical narrative was dominated by a Eurocentric perspective that systematically minimized or ignored African achievements. Fortunately, this is changing. Archaeologists, historians, and educators around the world are working to correct these historical errors, and every time we share these stories, we take an important step in that direction. The walls of Benin are not just an impressive technical achievement. They are a symbol of what Africa has always been capable of accomplishing when it has had the conditions to do so. They remind us that creativity, organization, and human brilliance are not the privilege of any particular race or continent. When we look at these monumental fortifications, we see more than stone and earth. We see concrete proof that Africa had, and has always had, civilizations as sophisticated and powerful as any other in the world. The Benin Empire, with its impossible walls, its magnificent bronzes, and its complex social organization, represents one of the peaks of human achievement. And it is a tragedy that this history was buried for so long under layers of prejudice and ignorance, but now you know the truth about the greatest walls ever built by humanity. And with that knowledge comes the responsibility to share this story, to make sure it is not forgotten again. Because when we know our true history, the complete history of humanity, including the extraordinary achievements of Africa, we become wiser, more just, and more aware of our collective potential as a species. The legacy of Benin lives on in the ruins of its monumental walls, in the beauty of its bronzes scattered across museums around the world. And now, in your awareness, use that knowledge, share this story, be part of the historical correction that our generation has the privilege and the responsibility to carry out. If this story impacted you as much as it impacted me, give it a like so more people can learn this incredible truth. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that will change your perspective on the greatness of Africa, and tell me in the comments which part of this story surprised you the most. Until next time, and remember, Africa was always great. We are only just realizing it now.